Gaming handhelds galore have been released in the past couple of years, with the latest, in every sense of the word, being the Zotac Zone. After trying out this handheld back at Computex and then again at Gamescom, and consumers having to wait a long while after the original release date to actually get their hands on it, I can finally bring you my Zotac Zone full review. So the Zotac Zone is another gaming handheld to the tune of the Asus ROG Ally X and the Lenovo Legion Go. However, the fact it's coming in quite late means it has to perform exceptionally well or have some pretty cool defining features in order to truly hit the mark. And unfortunately, my time with the Zotac Zone has proved otherwise. The Zotac Zone comes in at a pretty high price point of £849. And with a price point like that, it really needs to justify it. While it feels like it's halfway there with some flashy features like the radio dials, a fingerprint scanner, and a webcam, I'd rather leave these features behind for better processing power, a bigger battery, any day of the week. Or, you know, a lower price point. Of course, you get a dark grey shell, which is matte as to not pick up too many fingerprints. Unlike the original Asus ROG Ally, which took a leap and came in a pure white shell, the Zotac Zone has stuck to the darker colour scheme that you find with the majority of the other gaming handhelds. On the device, you get symmetrical joysticks, you get a super satisfying clicky D-pad, and of course your A, B, X, Y buttons. As I stated earlier, you get radial dials which are present on the bottom of the joysticks. You can program these to do whatever you want, whether it's adjusting the brightness, the volume, but to be completely honest with you, I don't think I use these once. Seemingly they're quite cool, but I just don't see the function behind them, especially when you can press a button to pull up a quick menu to adjust your brightness and volume anyway. You also get two trackpads on either side of the device, which are super useful. On screen now is a rundown of the key features of the Zotac Zone. And yes, you did read that right, the device has a fingerprint scanner and a webcam. So the fingerprint scanner comes placed at the top of the device, which also functions as a power button. In my time with the device, I didn't use it at all, in the sense that I didn't even set it up. Pressing the power button and then entering my PIN code to unlock the device was enough security for me, but for those looking for that extra layer, you do get this fingerprint scanner. I just don't see the purpose behind it. Again, a feature I didn't use at all was the webcam. Whilst I did boot it up to test it out and see the quality of it because I was reviewing the device, had I not been reviewing it, I never would have used it. The quality of it was passable for video calls, it was fine, but you wouldn't be using it for streaming or anything where you want that higher quality. And there aren't really any occasions that come to mind that suggest when I'd need to use a webcam on a gaming handheld. It really just rendered this feature obsolete. However, if you are working from home from your Zotac Zone and need to answer a Zoom call, you can. Moving on to more useful features, on the back of the device you get two additional buttons labelled M1 and M2, and these can be programmed to replicate any other required button. However, these additional buttons don't register as additional inputs in all titles, so be warned that you might not be able to use them all the time. You also get adjustable triggers, which mean that you can switch between hairline triggers and the full push trigger. There's a switch straight on the back of the device right next to either of the trigger buttons. So depending on what game you're playing or what's more important to you, you can adjust your device accordingly. The Zotac Zone specs are pretty good, but nothing to write home about when compared to other gaming handhelds on the market. You get the AMD Ryzen 7 8840U APU, which essentially provides the same level of performance as the AMD Z1 Extreme Edition chip, which is featured in a range of other alternative handhelds, including the Asus ROG Ally, the Asus ROG Ally X, the Lenovo Legion Go. Moving on, considering the Zotac Zone is coming in so late compared to alternatives on the scene, you'd expect them to learn from the mistakes of the competition, and unfortunately they haven't done in terms of the RAM specifically. You get 16GB of RAM in the Zotac Zone, and we all know from the Asus ROG Ally that this just wasn't enough, and the Asus ROG Ally X actually released with 24GB a year later, just because of demand. Another clear example of Zotac not learning from the competition is the battery capacity. There's no point having a super powerful gaming handheld in your hands if it only lasts 90 minutes and then turns into a useless brick. The Zotac Zone battery capacity sits at just 48.5 watts. Both Asus and Valve improved the battery lives of their gaming handhelds with the new releases in the form of the Asus ROG Ally X and the Steam Deck OLED. And unfortunately, Zotac just didn't prioritize this as much as they should have. I found myself getting between 60 and 90 minutes of AAA gameplay out of the Zotac Zone, which is just a little bit disappointing. If you're going to be using the handheld on the go, you want more than an hour of game time from it. Of course, if you're playing indie titles or less intensive games, then you're going to get more time out of it. Sometimes I was able to get closer to 4 hours and sometimes even 6. However, that's not the point of these gaming handhelds. They provide you with this excellent level of performance so you can utilize it, not so the battery can die. So yeah, this was just a little bit disappointing. The Zotac Zone also features a 120Hz screen, which again has become more common for gaming handhelds, which just puts it on par with the competition instead of exceeding it. However, one point about the screen which has kind of blown me away is the AMOLED. Having the AMOLED screen does make that little bit of difference. Games either look brighter or darker, whatever you're looking for. Similar to other gaming handhelds on the market, the Zotac Zone allows you to choose your power limit. However, instead of just being limited to 3 different modes, such as silent, performance and turbo, you actually get a slider to adjust this however you might need. Of course, as you move the slider up, you get higher performance, and as you move it down, you get lower performance, but you're preserving some of that quite low battery life. I would recommend only using those higher levels of power output when you actually have the device plugged in, otherwise the battery just depletes way too quickly. It's also worth noting that the device gets pretty hot when you're at those higher power output levels, but that's to be expected. Of course, it's working much harder, but just something to be mindful of. When trying to adjust the slider in the settings, sometimes I was unable to do so. It was just like grayed out, which was a bit frustrating. Even when restarting the device, the issue persisted and it took a couple of restarts to get it to work sometimes. Hopefully this is just a small bug that can be rectified quite easily. So I tested the Zotac Zone with a variety of different games. Counter-Strike 2, Cyberpunk 2077, even Baldur's Gate 3. And just for reference, I ran them all at 1080p with medium to low resolution settings. While not providing out of this world frame rates when compared to alternatives, all the games were playable. I wasn't having to completely stop any of them. And here are the frames on screen now. Of course, for more intensive titles like Cyberpunk or Baldur's Gate, I was having to adjust the graphics settings to pretty much the lowest they could possibly go. With games that are so pretty to play on PC, especially with the added benefit of ray tracing, it can be a little bit disheartening to see them in this light. They just looked quite ugly. However, that doesn't make them unplayable by any means, just ugly. You get pretty good performance from the Zotac Zone. A wide range of games ran quite smoothly and the AMOLED screen looked fantastic. I got consistent frames in every single game I played, whether it was indie or AAA titles, but unfortunately for me that's just not enough for the Zotac Zone to justify its price point, especially when compared to the competitors on the market. There are other gaming handhelds that can provide that exact same experience for cheaper, and if anything you actually get more added benefits to picking them up, like a higher battery capacity. For example, I found that in my testing, the Asus ROG Ally X ran Street Fighter 6 at a higher frame rate with better graphic settings whilst in performance mode. Baldur's Gate 3 also ran a little bit better, but we're talking marginal differences here. While there aren't many OLED options on the gaming handheld scene, particularly ones that run Windows, I don't think it's worth sacrificing better graphics, a higher battery capacity, and more frames in order to have this. It kind of makes you wonder who this device is even for, and that particularly becomes the case when you consider it has a fingerprint scanner and a webcam. These little add-on features feel like a forced way for Zotac to try and score points with their gaming handheld, but unfortunately it's just not the case. They haven't really considered the end user here and who would actually use these features on the device. Honestly, the higher price point really is the nail in the coffin for me with the Zotac Zone. Had it been the same price as some of the competitors' versions, I could see it being a much better deal because of course you get the OLED screen. However, disappointingly, in an age where it already feels like gaming handhelds are excessively expensive, I just cannot recommend one that's at a higher price point. However, if you are specifically looking for the features on offer here and you really want that AMOLED screen, then the Zotac Zone is a perfectly viable gaming handheld. So all in all, I give it a shiny 3 stars out of 5. So, are you guys going to be picking up the Zotac Zone? What do you think of it? Do you think it's coming too late or not? My name is Jasmine, and thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!